Welcome to the inaugural episode of The Road Ahead, a brand new series right here on Temple where we will confront head on the toughest issues facing the Caribbean. Together with heads of government and industry leaders, we will seek to advance solutions to the most important matters affecting our beloved region. I am Frederick Morton Jr., founder and chief executive officer of Temple Network. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Mr. Hugh, partner at the Portfolio Marketing Group and former Secretary General of the Caribbean Tourism Organization. How are you, Hugh?
Hey.
Can you hear me? I think that someone has something going in the background.
How are you, Hugh? I'm fine, thank you, Frederick. Pleasure and an honor to be here.
Awesome. Well, Hugh, we certainly have been fortunate.
Going in the background.
Something. Just one moment.
We have been fortunate going in the background.
Does someone have because I don't, that's not me. Is it gone?
One moment.
Still there.
Okay, all right.
That's not me.
Okay.
Gone? One moment.
All right, to our viewers there, we just dealing with some technical difficulties. We want it to be perfect for you. Okay.
Okay. Gone? One moment. All right, to our viewers there, we just dealing with some technical
Sorry, me?
We want it to be perfect for you.
You.
I didn't
Okay.
think I
Gone?
did.
One moment.
All right, folks. We're about to be ready in a second. Actually, I think something happened. I think we're good now. All right. Okay. All right, folks. We're in the age of technology. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we got it together, so we're good. Well, as I mentioned, I'm here and joined by my esteemed colleague, Mr. Hugh, who is a partner at the Portfolio Marketing Group and former Secretary General of the Caribbean Tourism Organization. Hugh, I'm not sure that folks heard you, and how are you doing?
I'm not sure.
Okay. All right, Hugh, I think we have some technical difficulties here. Is everybody hearing me?
Delayed.
Yeah.
Okay, we're
But
not
then there
hearing
is
you,
that
Hugh.
echo.
Yes, the echo is the issue. And so we're not
Okay.
sure where that's coming from.
We're not hearing
is that echo.
All right,
Yes, the echo is the issue.
I can hear you, and I can hear Yvette, say something to me, please.
Hello.
All right, I'm hearing you crystal clear. Karen, say something to me, please.
Hi. Hello.
Perfect. James,
I can hear you.
I know you're muted. You're muted.
It's definitely Frederick, because you're the one that's
Testing.
echoing.
Frederick's echoing.
Echoing.
Hello.
James,
All right.
muted. You're muted.
Yep. Hi. Yeah, I'm here. Testing.
Okay.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Frederick's echoing.
I don't know where that echo is coming from. That's really strange. But let's proceed,
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
and hopefully it'll get better.
I don't know where that echo.
All right. So, well, first of all,
That's really.
I'm sorry, Phil.
But let's. And hopefully it'll get better. I don't know where that echo. All right. So.
No, folks in the listening audience, you would not believe that we just had a test that was perfect. We literally spent 15 minutes testing with no issues, and of course we are now live and we have this particular issue. But we're hoping that we would resolve it now. I feel like I'm not hearing anything in the background right now, so I think we might be okay. Yes?
I think so.
Ah, yeah, look at that. It is gone. I don't know how and where it went, but it's gone. Nothing is going to stop this party, folks. We are going to have a great time, and we have a lot of great things to talk about. Well, listen, Hugh, we certainly have been fortunate to organize a most distinguished panel, a group of leaders here today to begin our discussions. Why don't you do the honors at this point in introducing them?
Thank you, Frederick. First of all, it's a pleasure and an honor for me to be here. We have with us Yvette Noel-Schure, a renowned publicist and the president of Schure Media. Her clients include celebrities such as Beyonce. Welcome, Yvette. We have Karen Whitt, the senior vice president of the Hartling Group with hotels in the Caribbean, specifically the Turks and Caicos Islands. And Karen's also the first vice president of the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association. Welcome to the road ahead, Karen.
Thank you, Hugh.
And there's Dr. James Hospedales, a distinguished epidemiologist. He's the president and founder of Earthmedic. He's also the former head of the Caribbean Public Health Agency, CARPHA. And that's most of our panel, Frederick.
Indeed, indeed. James, how are you? Turn off your mute. We want to hear your voice. You're good?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. Very rainy day in Trinidad.
Yes, yes, I'm experiencing it myself. Perhaps maybe that's where that technical difficulty came in. Who knows? But thank you, Hugh, for introducing this distinguished panel, and welcome everyone to the road ahead. As a preliminary matter, some of the questions that will be directed and specifically directed to each of you individually, but I given your particular expertise, but I want you to feel comfortable interjecting if there's a particular point that you want to make, right? Okay, so now Hugh and I were fortunate enough to have had an in-depth discussion recently with one of the leading heads of government in the Caribbean, Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell, Prime Minister of Grenada. Grenada, Yvette, Grenada, I know what you want to do. As we focus our discussion on the tremendous health, social, and economic impact of COVID on the region, we begin our discussion with let's begin, I should say, our discussion with some of his opening remarks as to the impact on Grenada. Right, let's have a look. Well, Hugh, it is our pleasure to have with us today on the road ahead, Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell, Prime Minister of Grenada, to discuss, among other things, how he has successfully led the country during this period of crisis. He is, of course, no stranger to crisis and crisis management, having successfully led the country through not one, but two devastating hurricanes. And so we welcome the Prime Minister to share his views on managing through crisis, and importantly, what he believes is the road ahead for Grenada and the wider Caribbean. Welcome, Prime Minister Mitchell, to the road ahead.
Well, good afternoon to all of you, and certainly this is an important time for us to get the message out. So we welcome this opportunity for Tempo.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you have been a very big supporter of what it is that we do here at Tempo, and I must say at the beginning that we appreciate it very much.
I'm a Caribbean man. Anything Caribbean, you'll have my support.
Awesome, that I know. Well, now, PM, we've all had a very significant, well, first of all, let me say thank you for taking the time. We know that your schedule right now, it's an understatement to say that it is busy. And so we are very, very grateful for you to take the time out this morning. Right, so we've all had a very significant adjustments to make to our personal and professional lives over the last 2 to 3 months. How would you say the country is coping during these challenging times?
For the country, I think we, by and large, what we did in 2013 when we came back into office, we engaged the social partners throughout the length and breadth of the country. The social partners, we engaged the trade union movement, the business community, the churches organizations, the leadership of different denominations, the non-governmental organizations, and people in general were engaged, because that's the only way we could have dealt with that very severe economic problems that existed in 2013. And I think we have kept the faith, so to speak, with respect to our commitment to involve them at all levels. So, and we kept that organization and relationship ongoing for the last 5-6 years. So when COVID-19 came about, we again identified the major problems and the hurdles that the country must go through. I addressed the nation, and of course, they engaged people at a personal level, and the cabinet members in general did. And I made the point that, based on my own understanding as a person, as you know, as a person of science myself, I recognize from what I was hearing that we had to rely heavily on the science for what was taking place. So we engaged the country and informed them of some of the drastic decisions, and we were one of the first country to lock down several parts of the country, services. You could feel a sense of people are getting tired of being inside, and people would like to see us open. So we have to confront this new present situation where people balance the question of the economic fallout, the health problems that may emerge, and of course the psychological pressure people are under at this particular time, because we are seeing more incidents of people doing things which are not normal in a normal society. So we are noticing it, and I'm pretty sure that it is happening in other countries. But this is tough times to be in a house or in a building much more hours than you have ever been. It's causing some psychological problems. Other than that, I think the country has settled down, and we move into the next phase.
Right. So distinguished panel, you see that the Prime Minister had some really interesting things to say in his opening remarks. Now, James, we're going to start with you. The Prime Minister specifically pointed to his science background as one of the leading factors in recognizing early that the then looming pandemic was going to be very serious. And indeed, we all know that it turned out to be exactly that, requiring the lockdown of the country and other drastic measures. It got, I think everyone would agree, scary very quickly. Here we are, a couple of months later, having been quarantined, as you can see, indicated that some folks are having, psychological reactions to that quarantine as well. But we are speaking about the next phase, which he indicated, and that would include opening up the borders and lifting restrictions, etc. But given what we know about the last couple of months and how scary it has been, give us a sense of what we are to expect with the movement to the next phase, given the fact that it has been a very scary past 2 months.
Thanks, Frederick, and good afternoon to everyone. Hello to fellow panelists, Hugh. Thanks for inviting me to participate on this first edition of The Road Ahead. And given the time that we're in, very appropriately looking at the COVID pandemic. And we just heard from Prime Minister of Grenada that they acted early. And that's a key point, acting early. So you gain leverage over the epidemic. Perhaps I could just make a couple of framing comments and then return to the Grenada situation and the Caribbean more generally. I wrote a piece in the British Medical Journal in April that COVID was a wake-up call of more than one kind for us. It emerged from a forest on the other side of our planet, as other viruses have emerged. And so that business of the destruction of rainforests in particular is something that we have to really be much more careful about. And it met a world in which we have 1.4 billion international travelers. So something that has some asymptomatic aspects to it or mild aspects in a 14-day incubation period, it started to spread. I first got the news, well, like everybody, I guess, late December, but I was speaking to a friend on lockdown in the Beijing embassy compound on February the 12th. And he described to me how it was spreading in China and there were lots of asymptomatic cases. And I thought, it's going to spread around the world. 1.3 billion Chinese and 101, whatever the number is, 1 billion international travel arrivals per year. So people rapidly came to that conclusion. WHO declared it public health emergency of international concern and so on. I've seen a lot of different epidemics in my years in practice. SARS, Ebola, well, we were threatened with Ebola, Zika, and COVID is the latest of these emerging infectious diseases. And we can, in the road ahead, we can expect some more of these as humans continue to interact with forests. So the whole business of managing a forest and wildlife is important in preventing these things longer term. COVID also meant a population very unfit, overweight, high blood pressure. Those of you who know me know I talk about this a lot. Diabetes, air pollution in some places, and that the virus just has a heyday when that happens. So beginning right away, what can we do before COVID arrives? Because it will eventually arrive, barring a good vaccine. We can remember that the 1918, 1919 so-called Spanish flu circulated around the world for upwards of 30 years after it first happened. So if it didn't get you the first time, a couple of years later, it comes back. Of course, we're much more we travel a lot more, so it maybe wouldn't circulate for that long, but I would expect we would be coexisting with COVID for the next few years. And that has obviously a lot of implications for travel, for business, for our own individual lives. It's still a new disease, it's evolving, and we keep learning new things about it every few days, every week. In terms of transmission, which everyone's so concerned about, one of the things that became more clear recently is how hazardous closed airspaces are if somebody is infected and shedding virus in that situation. So we saw with Trinidad and Tobago, where I am, that there was a cruise ship with about 70 or 80 Trinis on it. And when they got back and they were tested, 8 out of 10 people were infected. 8 out of 10. So that tells you that close and prolonged contact, high chance of spread, such as in a cruise ship environment. And I'm looking at Karen and I'm thinking, she must be thinking, what am I going to do with the hotel? Our church just, I might have mentioned this, we took a decision not to use the main air-conditioned church, which was a lot of money was spent on, but in fact to use the old church hall, open all the windows, put fans on, so you get good cross ventilation and virus can't be hanging around for somebody to inhale. So that's a practical point. So we have all these travelers and we have a very interlocked global financial system, banking and financing. And so travel has taken a hit, the financial systems of the world, people can't remit monies. We face a challenge like we haven't quite faced before. I haven't said it yet, but I think we're pretty much around the 8 million case mark and something approaching 500,000 people who have died from this disease. So this is a serious problem. It has an incubation period of 2 to 14 days, and quite a lot of people who get it, especially younger people, have little or no symptoms, and that's part of the challenge. That's how it can spread. It's spread by touch, but it's spread by droplets from sneezing or coughing, again, as everyone knows, I think, or should by now. And most people can get it, but get over it. And that brings me to the concept of some people being very vulnerable, particularly hypertension that is uncontrolled, diabetes, chronic pulmonary disease. And hypertension uncontrolled is an easy one in a way to deal with. Again, I'm looking at Karen and thinking of all the thousands of people working in the industry. And it should be something that we should have a program for to make sure you have your pressure checked, especially if you're a guy, they don't like to have it checked, get it checked, get it under control, and stop smoking if you're a smoker. Those are clear pieces of advice that if we apply widespread across the travel and tourism workforce, we will save a lot of lives. Save a lot of expense.
So James, there's a lot here which we're going to have to tackle you on, and in fact, we're actually going to be engaging on some other questions as well in relation to the crisis. If we could just switch gears for a quick second, one of the things that, and we're going to hear another clip from the Prime Minister in a minute, but one of the things that Prime Minister Mitchell said was that a crisis is not a level playing field. He looked at his entire population and determined that, you know, a crisis does not hit everybody in exactly the same way. And in fact, he had a couple of really interesting things to say about the workers in Grenada. Let's listen once again to Prime Minister Mitchell.
Like everything else, whenever there is a crisis or there are crises, one has to realize, related to a country, that some of us would be in a better position to bear the burden of that crisis. In other words, the most vulnerable in a society, there must be special arrangement. Whatever decisions that you make nationally, within that formula, you have to map out a specific sets of initiative to have those who will not be able to cope with the decisions and the problems that particular incident brings. So when we constructed that program going forward, we made a definite decision that with the fiscal space that we had, that we were going to have the workforce that's at the lower level in the country in general, that we have made it very clear in my first national address that we are going to provide some specific financial support to the workers who were laid off directly being affected by COVID-19.
So he's essentially saying, the Prime Minister is pointing out that, you know, we can have as many programs and procedures and policies as we like, but once we open up, we are dependent upon the workers. Who looks after the workers? So a lot of interesting stuff there, and we're going to move to a discussion about the actual effect on the economy. So Frederick, we have such a journey to travel along this road. We're actually going to take a quick look at what the Prime Minister says about the economy, because I want to have us tackle first Karen when we talk about the economy and the effect that this crisis has had on the Caribbean economy. Let's hear.
Prior to doing that, I would say, Hugh, I do have a question for James, and it's related to the first question that I posed. You know, we are going to phase 2. Should we be worried about that at this point, or it's something that we would have to do at this juncture? There are a lot of people that are concerned about phase 2. Particularly the aspect of opening up the borders. There's a lot of anxiety, particularly for countries, Hugh and I was talking about that have done a relatively decent job of containing it. So if you're a country and you've had no death and everybody's recovering, and you say, let's go to phase 2 and open the borders, there's a lot of folks that get a little jittery about that. So, I mean, we're, in your mind, you know, and your experience with all of these different infectious diseases that have come before, are we at the stage where that should be happening?
It's a good question, and a tough one, obviously, because you're balancing lives and livelihoods. And this is always a balancing act in situations of epidemics and pandemics. I think if a country has had many months now of preparing and getting ready, preparing bed space, teams for tracing, et cetera, the first step would be freeing up the internal economy. so that as in Trinidad now, you're allowing movement inside the country. While the borders of most of our countries are closed, there are a couple of our countries that in reality don't have closed borders. Their borders are porous, particularly in the south down here, Trinidad and Tobago with Venezuela. And we know from various sources that there's quite a lot of transmission in Venezuela and nearby Brazil and Colombia. So in some ways, it's a matter of time. And therefore, you have to make a judgment call. Are you ready to start opening up because you think that your people are well educated enough, you've got a surveillance system that will pick it up, you can respond rapidly and contain it if it does come. Those are the questions that if the answers to those are reasonably satisfactory, then yes, I think you can consider reopening borders with good surveillance and rapid response systems in place. That should see us having maybe a smattering of cases from time to time, but no big outbreaks like you've seen in big cities, especially if we can put in place other solid measures, the hand washing, the ventilation, and so on.
I see. Okay, well, that's a fair answer. It was a, you know, you handled that quite well, actually, because I thought I was throwing you a bit of a curveball. That's okay. But yes, to your question now, Hugh, and the economy. I mean, that's one of the big drivers of opening up borders. And you were mentioning in the introduction to the next clip that the different countries have to make an assessment as to when to open those borders and get the economy going. First internally, as you mentioned, James, and then internationally. Some countries are better suited for that. So let's hear from as Hugh mentioned, let's hear from the Prime Minister as to where Grenada is in that thinking.
Right, exactly.
In the case of Grenada, when we look at the data, the key to economic growth that we've had, we have over 5% growth. As you know, the IMF just came out with a very strong positive report on Grenada, and in fact projecting that we'll grow by 6% plus next year. So we recognize that there are clearly some areas of tourism will not be able to recover as fast as some of the services. So we know the base of economic activity was educational services. Right? St. George's University is a case in point. That represents over 20% of the growth of the GDP of the country. Mm. We recognize tourism as a major factor. Agriculture clearly is another, because we have a pretty diversified economy. We're totally dependent on any one particular area. So you have to deal with the hoteliers for when they could possibly think of opening. At the same time, you have to deal with airlines of the protocol required for both of those areas. And of course, you have to also deal with the question of the health problems that can emerge. So we needed to sit down or to speak to and come up with agreements for all the three parties, the hotels, the government, which means representing the people, and of course the airlines. So that will take some time. By the way, one of the things I think we have been very good that has helped us a lot. But immediately after that, we recognized we must close on the country and take some drastic action. We established a cabinet subcommittee of ministers, but they were able to co-opt some other individuals from different sectors of society that meet almost every day to deal with all sorts of issues that come up and recommend the cabinet. The cabinet was still the decision maker, but we were being advised, and the Attorney General, because the legal aspect must be also in place, regulations that guide people's actions throughout those periods must be in place. So we did that. I think that helped a lot because we had a mixture of persons on the cabinet subcommittee, COVID cabinet subcommittee, and that helped us a lot in confronting the problem. So I think the decisions that we take and some of the ones that we had, I was involved, but I was not involved in every single detail actions. When they recommend and they box it again, with me, and I have to look at the political, economic, and the legal consequences of decisions that we make in going forward. And St. George's University, we're expecting to open, to come back in by the 1st of August, which means there's an optimism there with respect to it, because it is not just the thousands of students that were in the country paying, involving in some form of social and other cultural activities and providing resources. But you're talking about the ancillary activities like the restaurants and all of the different areas that were benefiting from the presence. And so we'll see before the last quarter of the year, with St. George's University being back and many of the hotel projects under construction coming back on or starting to get over. I think you will see more and more economic activity and more revenue from taxpayers in the country.
Lots of really interesting stuff there from Prime Minister Mitchell from Grenada. So no doubt we're all anxious to jump in and to have the rest of the discussion going on that. And let's start with Karen Whitt, because the Prime Minister specifically talked about reopening and hotels and so on. He had a lot to say about the diversification of the economy. And here were we talking about tourism as the engine that's driving the economies of most of these countries in the Caribbean and employing 2.5 million of our people. But the Prime Minister is talking about diversifying the economy and making sure that all of Grenada's eggs certainly aren't in one basket. Karen Whitt, what say you about all of this?
So, there's several points and different questions that I would love to tackle on it, but to try and keep it concise, one of the key things he said, I believe, in the opening was the public-private partnerships, which are really so critical, at a time like this, in any crisis, really and truly, but something this extreme that we've all really never faced before. We have found in the region, one of our best assets was our partnerships and our ability to come together and problem solve, whether it be from a medical and a scientific standpoint or a humanitarian standpoint. I think it's important for me to backtrack 1 second and just mention, James, you spoke about health and wellness of our people, and we in the region really suffer from some serious hypertension and diabetes and so forth. So one of the things that we're doing here is all of our teams must go through a health screening, and the people who are at high risk are being moved from the front line. So those persons won't be frontline exposure, to the visitors coming in. And I didn't want to forget that point, because I think it's a relevant point, because we have a responsibility not only to keep, tourists safe, but our people, our staff and residents. In terms of the economy, a lot of economists would argue that tourism is one of the hardest hit sectors, but as I watch the world economy on a daily basis, this has just hit every sector. So I'm not sure that diversity in this instance would have made a huge difference, simply because with the measures that we had to take through the lockdown, closing our borders and protecting our people, I'm not sure what economy could have or would have made a difference in terms of where we are today. One thing that I would like to add is that I think I heard him mention something about construction and some different economies, but what I would love to see in the region is for every destination to really focus on their natural resources and grow their economy from something that's already exists. I don't think that we have to look too far beyond travel and tourism to have adjuncts, which can ultimately make a difference in the future. For example, Grenada, I have not been to that island, but I know it as the Spice Island, and I've heard so much about the incredible flora and fauna, and the first thing that comes to my mind, what if you had a Cordon Bleu university in Grenada, so you tie in your natural resources. And again, there is a slight edge towards travel and tourism. So I think we just have I'm saying this to suggest that through the region, every destination has amazing opportunity for economy. Undoubtedly, we're all crushed. The region, the Caribbean region, tourism is the #1 economic driver. And so we're all trying to figure out how to jumpstart it. What are the phases going to be? How is it ultimately going to come from recovery to stabilization, right? Because we're just touching on recovery right now. We're just barely coming out of crisis. And certainly it's going to be some time before we see things start to stabilize. But I think local economy is one that is difficult with a small community, because then you don't have, the populations to support it. But as we start to slowly open our borders, really and truly, what we've got to do is instill confidence in those consumers that this is a safe place to be. And James, you did mention some of those benchmarks that really are critical, I guess, to feeling confident and to being able to do that. And so from a resort perspective, from a destination perspective, we're working together so that we can cover every aspect of that journey. Because I do wish to say, in the Caribbean in particular, but I guess it could be true for most hospitality destinations, we're used to dealing with crisis. We're used to dealing with, I'll just say norovirus type diseases. So this one is different, undoubtedly. However, there was some foundation of you deal with this crisis, you execute, you prepare, and so forth. So I think we're well on our way to a great formula, if you will, which I'll share with you a little bit later. I'll kind of stop here and let somebody else chime in. But the measures that we've taken, the measures that the region has taken, one thing that is beautiful about what we have today is that the Caribbean is closer than ever before. We are, from a regional perspective, talking to each other every single day, sharing best practices, working together. The protocols are difficult, and one of the challenges is it's a fluid situation that changes every day. With something that we set in place 2 weeks ago could be slightly different today because there's new metrics, there's new research, new data to sort of mesh that into something different or better. But that being said, it's an area that is working closely together to try and mitigate as best we can and provide sort of the best environment for people to visit and return to.
Well, Hugh, if I might, Karen, I gotta say I'm heartened because I sense optimism. I sense optimism, and that's so important in times like this. And so I'm quite heartened to hear what you just had to say. One of the things that the Prime Minister actually said, we won't play that clip necessarily, but he did talk about the construction sector becoming very much alive again in Grenada. They opened up the construction and manufacturing sector, and so I did take the opportunity to ask him, well, what type of construction? Interestingly enough, he said, in addition, you know where I'm going. He sure did. He sure did. He said, yeah, there's 4 new hotel projects. So in line with the optimistic view that you just expressed, I'm sure there's a lot of folks, including myself and in the audience, that would be quite shocked at that, right? Who would be building a hotel in this environment? So perhaps you could shed some light on that.
Who would be building a hotel in this environment? Is that what exactly is your question? I want to make sure I answer it correctly.
Right. Well, one would think that with the current environment and us trying to encourage the visitors to return, that being our primary objective, it would seem odd that there would be such activity in the construction sector, and it wouldn't seem natural. So from your perspective, could you shed some light on that?
Absolutely. So, I feel like our hearts have not changed. The world has. And travel, I guess, years ago could have been considered as a luxury and something that, you plan for once a year and it's your big vacation. And now travel is a way of life. Travel is something that, it's a part of people's life, and it's a normal thing that you do to rest, rejuvenate, explore. And I feel like in the Caribbean in particular, there's a lot of curiosity about who we are, more so than just the sun, sand, and sea. There's a lot of opportunity to really dig into the richness, the cultural heritage of the region. And we're seeing more and more people who come now to the shores, not necessarily just to come and enjoy the beach, although they all do, they want a little bit more. And in Grenada in particular, tourism is a large economic driver there. However, I think in terms of, you know, the history of hospitality in Grenada, that's something that is definitely growing. And again, there must be, you know, the numbers must show that that curiosity factor. They've had 2 amazing resorts that have opened in the last 18 months and been very successful. And so people are exploring, people who are used to coming to the Caribbean are exploring more and more. The other thing about the region, I think that is so critical, our number 1 demographic really and truly is the United States, and that's heavily skewed to the Eastern Seaboard, right? So that being said, it's an easy access vacation or holiday, and it almost is more than just a vacation. Again, I think travel now is a way of life. Travel unites. People still have that yearning for, you know, that the human connection and to get out and to experience something new. This is an easy way to do it. The flights are very accessible, you know, the transfers and so forth. So I think from that perspective, there's a lot of curiosity. People obviously are paying more attention to the region, not only from a development standpoint, but visitor arrivals continue to grow up and up exponentially. So I think that's a very smart move. I take my hat off to the people who are building those hotels.
Okay. Okay.
Well, no one's going to fill those rooms though, unless the messaging is right. And we happen to know someone who is a wordsmith and who's an expert on getting the messaging right, and the publicist to the stars. We wonder if there's some comment that will come from Yvette Noel-Schure on all of this. What should we be saying to people? How do we get them back first? Karen Whitt was talking about filling hotel rooms. How can you help the Caribbean to do that, Yvette?
You know, I've heard a lot sitting here, and no words that are untrue will get someone to travel. Everyone's a little scared. Let's be honest. I think that what Dr. James says is probably the most important thing. You know, before we write flowery press releases and do new photo shoots with great photos at the shore, we have to be honest with what is going on. And I think one of the things that is still so exciting for people wanting to go to the Caribbean is generally the low count of infection and death. You know, people are giving New Zealand a high five, and they're giving the Caribbean region a high five. But, you know, I think about it in terms of numbers. Prime Minister Keith Mitchell and the other prime ministers around the region had no choice but to act fast. Our populations are so small. They're so small. So, you know, to think about the devastation that would have ensued had we said, just keep the borders open, we're good, or believe the nonsense that people were saying that, you know, if you just lay in the sun, you're going to be okay. You know, just come and lay in the sun. You know, I'm sure there's some truth to that, but you can't tell a whole bunch of people just come and lay in the sun and you won't get the infection, right? So I think that before we get to fancy brochures and before we get to, you know, incredibly written press releases, we have to sit down and talk about the truth. We have to spill out to people everything that the islands have done, and more importantly, what they've put in place to make sure that you're safe. And I think when it comes to hotels, and my favorite right now is Silver Sands, I think that they have to be very honest and do this in a phase, right? So don't go for full capacity right away, because you have to work with the health ministers, with the health sectors to make sure that this is going on. And people are going to have to be a little uncomfortable when they're leaving the US or the UK. They should be subjected to, you know, temperatures. They should be subjected to temperatures when they arrive. There should be almost like an unwritten doctrine that says, if you arrive and you are running a temperature that you run the risk of having to quarantine. I was speaking to a very good friend in New Zealand last night. And, as you know, Jacinda Ardern is being highlighted as so incredible a prime minister. And there was a statement made a week ago. New Zealand is COVID-free. And we all rejoiced about that. And then a week ago, they allowed someone to come in to New Zealand for a funeral, special pass for a funeral. And guess what? That person had the virus.
Not COVID-free anymore.
Exactly. So I think before we could boast about all of that and write, like I said, great press releases, the most important thing in the press release would be about safety. And I think, just on something that Karen said, we have to paint the Caribbean as more than beaches and beautiful weather. There are incredible islands, and they all give you something very different. I'm certainly waving the Grenada flag, and I really believe that our agrarian society is a very important one. I've been pushing that people should go back to the soil. They should eat properly. All the things that Dr. James says about trying to make sure we put off those pre-existing conditions. And then I just want to say, something that the Prime Minister said has never changed, no matter how well the economy is, no matter what. The workers of Grenada, and when I say workers, I'm not talking about the executives. I'm talking about the workers, the guys that put the tar on the ground, on the roads, the guys that go up to the mountains and cut the cocoa off the trees, the guys that have to ship the bananas, the guys that have to get the nutmegs going, work as a community, work very, very close together. From construction to all of the laborers, they work as a community. So you've got to put measures in place to make sure that those who are working so closely, they are the ones that's possibly the most vulnerable, are the ones that are taken care of. And I love that the Prime Minister is so about that, making sure, because for Grenada and every other island to come back into our beautiful shores, into those great hotels, somebody calls and say, what word should we use? What should we say? We've got to take care of the workers. They are going to be the most essential to the development of the economy. I am a little controversial in that I'm a little dismayed. And I'm the biggest Grenada fan and the biggest Keith Mitchell fan. And I understand about the construction coming back, but unlike the Prime Minister, and maybe a little bit unlike Karen, I'm a little nervous that we're going to have these empty hotels. I think I'm not saying stop the construction, because obviously the same people we spoke about, the same workers are going to be paid. They're going to be paid. They're going to be doing the work. So it's a catch-22 that you want to build and you want to bring more people in, but it has to be done slowly, deliberately, and most importantly, it has to be carefully, with the biggest concern for people's safety and their health.
Well, I think you make a tremendous point, particularly with what the messaging ought to focus on. At this point, historically, our messaging is about our beautiful beaches and our sand and our sun and rejuvenation, etc. But most folks who are looking to travel, I think it's fair to say at this point, you want to make sure you're okay when you step onto the plane. I mean, really step out of your house, step onto the plane. And when you land, you want to know that you're in a country that took the matter serious. And then when you get to your hotel, you want to make sure that that hotel has taken the matter equally serious. I mean, I was just talking to Hugh earlier this morning, and we were just, something as basic as coming into the hotel room and laying on the bed, gives you some anxiety at this point. So who was there before? Were those sheets, how were they washed? I mean, something as basic as that, right?
Exactly. Frederick, just let me add that part of publicity and marketing is it has to be visible, right? You have to be able to to touch it and see it. Now, if you're used to, and all of us here travel all the time, travel all over the world. If you're used to seeing a certain thing and expect a certain thing, for you to feel safe and comfortable, it has to dramatically change. You have to see something completely different. Instead of handing me the drink of the day with a beautiful buttercup or hibiscus stuck in the glass, it would be awesome to just be given a little basket filled with sanitized wipes and everything you need to not only assure you that the hotel is doing all of this, but to make sure that you are doing extra, your own self, extra soaps, you know, little soap, just little things that constantly give the reminder. Not only is the hotel doing that, but your welcome basket on the bed, you know, with the towels that look like the swans.
Right.
In the middle of that, give me everything I need. I do it in my house. You know, now that we're sort of going between 3 houses with my family, you know, when they come at the foyer, these things are there for them to see, for them to remember. And I think these are the things we have to do. Frederick, I think independent of this Road Ahead panel, you and I had a conversation about how incredible safe I felt when I went to Jamaica.
Yeah.
And that was back in December. I don't know, they must have read the memo early that Dr. James had, because when I got to the airport, I was happy and stunned to see the biggest gallon of sanitized gel I'd ever seen. And I was just like, whoa, wow. You know, we were all paying attention to China, but to see that they were like, you know, everybody that comes in. And then when I was in parts of Africa, that they would test you when you land, you know, those things, if we do that and it becomes as natural as how we all had to change into putting our seatbelts on. Remember the time when we didn't put seatbelts on? If you make that a habit and you make it visible for people to see the changes that each island is making, it becomes greater than any press release, any brochure, and any kind of ad or commercial you could place.
So Yvette, if I could just address a couple of points you said, because I love what you're saying, and it's almost like you somehow got into my head. And I agree with you. We have a new buzzword around here, make sanitary sexy, right? Because in the past, you know, you think about an expectation when you come to any resort for that matter, but especially maybe a 5-star luxury resort, you have a certain benchmark expectation of things that would be done. Like you said, what your expectations are. But now it's become important that we go back to our DNA of, you know, hospitality 101, and we're checking those boxes and making sure that we're not only providing that, but you know that. For example, to your point about the amenity package, one of the things that we're doing, taking that a step farther, on arrival, you will receive a package that will have your pen, your notepad, all your amenities, your magazines, your in-room dining guides, only for you. You're going to get it. You're the only one that's touched it. We don't even want to leave it in the room, because then there's still that shadow of doubt. Hey, did the last guest utilize this piece, right? So we're taking extreme measures. And one of the things that's important for me when I'm trying to promote, you know, a feedback that we keep getting from travel partners is it can't be too clinical, because at the end of the day, we have to bear in mind why people are coming here. Why are they taking that large leap and getting on that plane? Because they want to be pampered. They need rest, rejuvenation, they need experiences. So somehow we have to balance out the new norm and still maintain. And I'll give you a really good example of that. When you arrive at a hotel, you get a cold towel, a cold scented towel. And you know, it's this intoxicating lavender scent or whatever the signature scent of the hotel. Well, we've twisted that concept a little bit. When you arrive here now, you get a hot towel. And the scent is still nice, but it's a little more sanitary, right? Because there's evidence to suggest that the COVID cannot exist in a certain temperature. So the message is that this towel has been heated beyond that temperature, fused with the sanitizer, right? So even though you expect cold because it's refreshing, guess what? We've done some role playing with it, and it's just as refreshing because you've gone from the airplane to the airport to the taxi, and you get out of the taxi here, and you just feel like you want to wipe your hands, right? So the point is, and we've got like several protocols along that line, but the point is that someone will not have to want for something that they had before, and now they're not getting it. They're still going to get it, but it's in a different format. It's in a different way. It's presented in such a way that you feel confident, you feel safe, you feel comfortable that, you know, that we're doing everything we can. And I think I want to really emphasize what you said about practicing, because I keep telling, I've done so many webinars actually for various hotels in the region, and I tell them, you cannot take a staff in a room and put a slide up on a screen and have them pass the test and say that they know this new standard or this new protocol. They have to role play. They have to do it over and over and over. And that's what we've been doing during these weeks, is that taking our team members and actually everything from the moment you come to the gate and you get your temperature checked, how does that feel? What is the message? You know, you can't let somebody feel like it's so clinical that you're not going to have a good time. You still have to do it in a hospitable way. So I love all your points, and really appreciate that.
Well, Frederick, we're going to turn to you for an executive decision because we're coming up to time now, and there's still so much to cover. We still have to find out when countries in the Caribbean actually are opening up. We have to ask Dr. Hospedales whether all of this is even enough, or are we about to become New Zealand, as Yvette mentioned. We have to talk about some of the regulations that the airlines are likely to impose, and we still have a lot to hear from the Prime Minister of Grenada about. So it looks like we're talking part 2 of the road ahead.
Well, we might be. You know, we suspected that this would happen. In fact, Yvette teased me. What did you say, Yvette?
I predicted it.
Yeah, Yvette.
I did too.
Yeah. She's never been in a discussion with me that did go overtime, right? And into extended hours. But you know, I wonder if we could continue for a few more. But I do anticipate there will be a part 2. I mean, every topic that we've touched already is worthy of its own, webinar, seminar, panel discussion. So what we're doing here, the road ahead is a series that is going to last for some time, because the road ahead is going to be quite a long one for us, right? As we emerge from the situation. And so we're going to take on a lot of these topics individually as well. So as the inaugural episode with this very distinguished panel, what we're trying to do here is to at least whet the appetite, start the conversation, and then we will jump off into other conversations and other panels. But if we could continue for a moment, I would say that that would please me and much of the audience that's already here with us. So if
That's great. Okay. Frederick, before I'm going to pretend that I'm not on this panel. I'm going to pretend that I'm not a traveler. And I want to specifically jump into Hugh and your position and talk to Dr. James, because I feel like people like me, you know, travelers, but also mothers and grandmothers and just everybody have been completely confused by the day-to-day changes of information that comes out. And part of that conversation had a lot to do, hold on, I'm just gonna decline something, had a lot to do with temperature. Not so much taking your feet for a fever, but there were erroneous things that came out, and a lot of Black people believed it. You know, melanin will save you. Going to the beach will save you. Just get like a bowl of hot water and inhale it the way your grandma used to give you Vicks to inhale. Dr. James, I beg you to tell us what is the correlation with temperature, particularly for those living in the Caribbean and Africa and so, but really just about the heat that we're all talking about that we somehow put with COVID as a healer. Help.
Well, she stumped me a little bit there, Frederick. First of all, let me say that we have good evidence that in the Amazon, where it's as hot as it is anywhere on this planet, you have a lot of brisk COVID transmission going on. And unfortunately, a lot of people of indigenous descent are dying in large numbers. And in Venezuela also, we're seeing quite a lot of spread from, we have a Venezuelan housekeeper. She just came back and she was saying that there's a lot of spread, all the cities, all the towns. So those are tropical countries that are hot. And I'm putting that forward to say that I don't believe that heat makes such a difference. I think we have more open environments. We don't have a big city like New York or Beijing, and that makes a difference, and more open air environments, and that makes a difference. Sunlight does kill the virus, and if you dry it out in hot sun, it will die. Many viruses will, not all, but some are tough, like hepatitis B is a tough one. But the idea that being on the beach, you're maybe less likely to get it than if you're in a closed-in bar with your buddies drinking, and one of them has it. You're going to be better off on the beach bar with a fan and the breeze blowing across. Then your buddy may cough, but the germs are going to go elsewhere. So I think I heard a lot of good things about the partnership and how Karen was saying there's a closeness that just wasn't there before. I would like to give a shout out to the hoteliers of our region. And I'll tell you a story. I was in Washington some years back, and there was a hurricane approaching. So I went to the hotel manager and I said, "What's your disaster plan?" And he said, "What? What do you mean?" I said, "What do you do?" They didn't have one. So after that, every hotel I go to in Washington, I ask them, "What's your disaster plan? What do you do if a hurricane hits you?" They don't have those plans. Every Caribbean hotelier, and Hugh, over the years, you would have been among the contributors, CHTA, we all have those plans. And for maybe one of the few times, the principals in New York and the principals in London will understand us better, because they didn't understand Zika or malaria, but they understand COVID because it's hurting them too. So I think there's going to have to be a really even deeper partnership between people, between the government ministries, and between the hotel sector, that public-private partnership that we talk about, because your staff have got to really get it, and people who are working and supplying things have got to really get it, and including preparing for when you do get a case or two. How do you contain that, treat it, not allow it to spread, and don't panic and shut everything down again? That's going to be the balance. But I hear what Yvette was saying about that fear. Do we really, that is the deep concern that everyone has, that as you open back up, some people may die that you didn't want to.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I clearly there's some aspect of rolling a dice right now. We are making decisions without, full and complete knowledge. It's a new situation. As the Prime Minister said, we have to balance a whole bunch of factors in making those decisions, and we hope that our leaders will be making those decisions in that balanced way. I think that one question that came to mind, Karen, as you were speaking to, and the points that Yvette made in terms of what the messaging is going to be. There's a spectrum of hotels and properties in the Caribbean, from very high end to moderate and to economy. The same question applies in terms of the vulnerabilities of these properties, right? And are we looking into a situation where some of these properties, or depending on where you are on the spectrum and your ability to respond, will dictate whether you survive or you don't survive, and will a certain amount of properties in any one of these categories go away? That's a question that came to mind as you were speaking about, not every hotel is given a super duper amenity bag or a hot or cold towel. So as in your capacity as an executive in CHTA. How do you deal with that? And is that a real concern?
It's an amazing question and a very serious concern, to be fair. So it starts at a grassroots level in each country. And again, cannot overemphasize that public-private partnership, because you've got to be guided by your ministries of health. You have to be guided by, your border controls as sort of the platform that you build on, if you will, for each protocol. CHTA has been very vibrant in providing, we have a COVID crisis resource center on our website, giving, everything from best practices, training modules, all the way through, and webinars. And, there's so much awareness that keeps getting circulated day in and day out. And as I said earlier, even that changes. It's a very fluid sort of, because how we started 6 weeks ago preparing these protocols, they have shifted based on, again, new evidence, new direction from your ministries of health, WHO and CDC and so forth. So it's a little bit daunting, but we are paying attention to that. I can only hope that each destination, Ministry of Tourism, Ministry of Health, is taking the lead and driving the engine, as ours are here in Turks and Caicos. We have had to have our standards approved. The hotels have to pass an inspection before we're given the green light to open on July 22nd. And that inspection includes, again, what are your new standards? What are your new protocols? What training have you done? And so forth. So I hope that we don't see a diminishing, situation of some of those that are less fortunate. And again, as I said early on, if we've done anything, we've connected in a much greater and stronger way. We've got to be our own brother's keeper. So I would implore each destination that has, the resources, who can help, your other partners share and do so, because it's really important that we have consistency. Yvette mentioned that earlier, that it has to be, the protocols have to be a certain way. And if you don't have that, it is difficult, to maintain a very strong, confident message that you're either COVID-free or, you said it, how to respond to a crisis. One of our benchmarks here in Turks and Caicos, and this was set by the government, established by the government, being able to open our borders that actually have a whole new dedicated wing in our hospital, which is now a COVID crisis center. We didn't have that before. And so therefore, there was no confidence really to bring people in. We have a very strong, a whole section of a crisis manual on how to deal with COVID patients, should you have a situation. And it's going to happen. Let's just face it, just like New Zealand, it is going to happen. But the best thing that you can do to mitigate, a disaster is just to be prepared and have your plan set. I certainly hope, we don't see the scenario that you described. And I think we can avoid it by working together. I think we're at a point now where I can safely say we've taken this seriously. In the beginning, we just didn't know what we didn't know. And we were making all sorts of assumptions and so forth. But I think at this stage, we've really pivoted into, as I said earlier, almost like starting to inch towards recovery. And a big part of that, again, it's the protocols, it's the standards, it's the information that you not only get, but that you share and you enforce. Enforcement, on the government side has to be.
The other thing, just to jump in, I didn't say it before, the other thing the hotels have got to have that would be helpful is a monitoring system. Before I left CARPHA, one of those was installed in many hotels, about 200 hotels have it. So you have a daily check as the manager on anybody reporting anything. And that gets you a little bit ahead of the curve with a tool that very few other places in the world have. Actually, there's nobody in the world that runs this. So this is another selling point. Right. When you've got a good monitoring system that'll tell you within a very short time somebody's not well. It's not to penalize or to make the person, it's for everyone else. You're your brother's keeper.
Yeah. And James, you could remember a few years back, the Caribbean had a real struggle with norovirus. And at that time, we relied heavily on CARPHA for exactly what you just said. So the good news is we're ahead of that curve because we already have these monitoring systems because of that, because of what we went through. So very good point.
Yeah.
And back to Yvette's point, the
Just,
marketing will not be so much about the flash, it's going to be about the confidence that we have good systems here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's actually what I was going to jump in and say, right? Going back to Hugh's question to me about what you write, what you say, what your messaging is. You know, yes, the truth, we have to get the truth to be really sexy. And when I plan a trip, one of the things that's important to me, not my work trip so more, but you know, when I'm planning to spend my own money, take my family on vacation, I check the ability for that country to take care of me if I become ill. It's a really important, I have turned down a lot of places that I wanted to go because I did not think they were adequate enough. Those were the days, especially when I was suffering very heavily with asthma. It's like, do I want to be sick in that country, right? So the truth is,
New
like,
Jersey in the winter is not good for asthma.
no, but it's like the truth is, when I went home, I was actually got some relief. But like when you are thinking about, you know, before COVID, when you're thinking about going on vacation, somebody telling you that they've got a monitoring system and stuff, like, you're like, what is that all about, right? But now I think our brains are going to be switched to wanting to know these things, to know these things. And I think a lot of hotel websites have to be rewritten. There's got to be a section in there to tell people the things you are post-COVID. But Karen, I did have a question for you when you were talking about when, let's say, all the borders are opened and you partner with the health departments and you sort of get the okay. Do you think that the Caribbean as a whole will do this in phases and could afford or want to be patient enough to have half capacity at a time? Are they ready? Because what would be very scary for me is if everybody's looking to have maximum capacity right away, as if there's a carnival going on, or there's a food festival going on, there's a music festival, and we just want every single room to be full. I think what is happening in certain companies that I've sort of been on a lot of people's council and sort of hearing from different companies, in terms of companies, what they're doing is they're already sort of deciding to have days that are going to be, these are the employees that come in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. These are the employees that come in, because no one at this time that I've spoken to anyhow feels comfortable going back to their companies with their full staff every single day. They don't have, how we all ran out of those offices, those offices are not prepared for all of us coming back into small conference rooms or small sort of, you know, powwow sessions. No one is ready for that. So how is the hotel planning to roll out in terms of capacity?
So really on that, I could only speak to our own hotel. I know what we've recommended, and I certainly hope that, you know, the rest of the region kind of follows suit. In terms of the staffing, our staff are anxious to get back to work. They really want to be, you know, doing what they do best. So I think the important key there are those health screenings. And for us, the onus is on us to ensure that the frontline workers who are exposed to those transient visitors are the ones who are the best equipped, not just physically, but emotionally as well, because let's face it, this has been an emotional drain, you know, for everybody. So the physical aspect though of it for sure. And as I said, those that we consider high risk with underlying conditions, we're pulling them into back of house operations. So there's not that immediate exposure. That's from the staff perspective. I know from our perspective as a hotel, yes, we are very much phasing into this in terms of occupancy levels across the board. For example, we cannot allow a back-to-back check-in, check-out. So that right there is going to dictate automatically that you cannot ever be, at a certain capacity, because we now, through our standards and protocols, have to allow the adequate time to air the room, freshen the room, sanitize the room correctly. And, we are following these guidelines of, COVID can live on this surface this long, this long, this long. So we now have protocols to address every one of those metrics. And I call it a metric because it seems to be changing. It changes quite rapidly on that. But and then the other thing about the occupancy levels, we are observing international, social distancing protocols. And so you look at the 6 feet, you look at, for example, on the beach, we will allow, if you're in a family group or a friend group, you can sit together, you can have your beach chairs together. But aside from that group, then there's going to be a 6-foot space between you and the next person. Same thing around the pool. And in restaurants, we're limiting the number of reservations that we can take in a given night so that there's never a large gathering of people. Now that is specifically to our resorts, and I can tell you, in the destination, that is pretty close on par with what I think everybody has agreed to. In the region, I know that there are some who are subscribing to that, but I couldn't guarantee that everybody is going to follow that protocol. But that makes the most sense. So the smart thing to do is to phase into it. I think it will happen organically anyway, because everybody's not flooding to get on those planes like right away. There are some people that are ready to come back. They're anxious to travel. They want to get an escape, and they want to come here. Our phones are ringing, but I don't think by and large we're going to see load factors the way we were when we shut down in March.
And the protocols do seem to be put in place by various destinations, and they're all opening up at different stages. I mean,
yes.
Barbuda has already opened up. Say Turks and Caicos is opening up towards the end of July. Bahamas is opening up shortly, July 1. Jamaica. I mean, various countries are opening up at various different times. Some countries have had no cases or almost no cases of coronavirus, and are extremely concerned about how to keep themselves protected. But there is this balance. Everybody's grandmother in the Caribbean used to say, certainly mine did, while the grass is growing, the horse is starving. So we're making sure that the grass grows and so on, and we tend it nicely. But what about livelihood? So there's that risk-reward equation all the time. One of the things that we have not talked about at all, Frederick, is the question of, well, first of all, before I go there, I should say, where is the information available? So if our listeners, our audience, want to know where to find information about which hotel and which countries opened up and so on, really and truly, Karen, I know that the CHTA has a good website, Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association.com. It has a site that people can go to, and the CTO, the Caribbean Tourism Organization, also has a website of all of its members. OneCaribbean.org is a place to go to, one of the places to go to find out who's opening when and what the protocols are and so on. We know that what's going to be expected of consumers will differ fairly significantly. I mean, that's something that we really are going to have to look further at as we go along. There are airlines saying that testing is going to be required before you get on board, and the airlines are saying that the middle seat will not be occupied, and some airlines are saying that everybody will have to wear a mask. Some airports are saying, sorry, say goodbye in the parking lot, because unless you're a passenger, you cannot come into the terminal. Some countries are saying, well, you're going to have to fill out your immigration and customs form ahead of time to be compliant with contactless or reduced contact with human beings. So do that online, and when you arrive, already your customs and information and immigration information is already in the system. There are all kinds of things that we need to talk about, and especially who's going to come back first. We need to know. Everybody's not going to get on a plane and come back at the same time, that's for sure. And there's a tremendous body of research that shows which kinds of travelers will start to come back first. We probably don't have the time to delve too deeply into that, but if I may, I would like a comment quickly on the Caribbean audience that we have, the Caribbean diaspora, people who are familiar with the Caribbean, whether they were born in the Caribbean or not, they identify with the Caribbean or are in somewhere within that spectrum, and people who are familiar with the Caribbean, who might have been coming there in the past and who have property there, people who know us and like us. Certainly we imagine that they will be among the first to come back. Is there any truth in that at all, Karen Whitt?
I would say that is definitely spot on. You know, the diaspora are anxious to come home and see their families. It's been a trying time for some people because they were expected to have been here and not able to. And I also believe that that is a good way to jumpstart the economy. You know, these are the people that have the confidence, that have the connections to the region. One of the interesting business models that we have in Turks and Caicos is the condo resort model, where you'll have a resort just like ours, the Shore Club. Each condo is individually owned, and those ownership are generally abroad. And so we also believe that those will be some of the first to bounce back into the region, because they want, and you mentioned, they want to visit their properties, their villas, their locations. And so that will help. And again, these people are telling us that they're ready to come back. Our travel partners, we have a strong alliance, as you know, Hugh, from your CTO days. We have just an amazing connection, a personal connection with so many of our travel partners, not only in America, but around the world. And those people we have remained connected with all throughout this crisis. And they're very much telling us that their clients are ready to travel. They still want those questions answered that you just said. And that is, at this stage, one of the most difficult parts, in that, you know, different countries have different entry requirements, restrictions, and so forth. We have been meeting consistently with the airlines, because the airlines keep changing their policies as well. So that becomes difficult for a person to feel confident about, okay, am I going to be quarantined? Am I going to face this? Do I have, you know, how many days? Some destinations are saying a test must be 3 days, some are 5 days, some are 10 days. So we are working hard. And when I say we, this going back to my CHTA hat, we're trying to standardize some of these things. And I hope eventually that we will, but it's not an easy fix. It's going to take some time. And I certainly would not have the best answers for you today. I think if you ask me this question in 6 weeks, I'm going to be much more equipped to give you a clarified answer on that.
That would be,
I think the road ahead is going to be, yes, I was going to say that. The road ahead will have to be clearer in 6 weeks.
Yeah. But you know, that the point you make really goes back to the question that I asked too, with regards to, you know, the spectrum of resorts and you know, who will emerge from this situation. Because if you're going after a particular target, I mean, there's not a lot. Everybody can't stay at a 5-star, right?
No.
And I assume, and I guess, James, you can tell me, and Karen, you probably know, that the standards have to be applied equally across the board, right? So if you don't have the economics in order to put the standards in place, you're gonna need some support. So are the governments going to support moderate, you know, to economy hotels in that effort to maintain the very standard that, let's say, 5 stars are going to have to maintain? Is there any conversations around that?
We haven't had, I'll come back to you, James. We haven't had those conversations, but I do want to be clear on one thing. Some of these protocols don't really require a lot of investment. Some of it is, you know, again, tweaking your standard operating procedures as they exist today to meet the new requirements. So it's not that every aspect of it, you know, has to require something that would prohibit a small hotel from participating and, you know, meeting the standards. Very good question about the governments and the participation. And I can assure you those are ongoing conversations as we speak today.
Awesome.
James? Speaking as a traveler, I would head for a small place first. Statistically,
really?
I'm much less likely to run into somebody else. If the place has 800 guests from North America, as opposed to 8 guests,
Hmm.
I would go to
The
a
window
small place,
open.
a small, well-run place. Yes.
That's a good
I
point.
see. Well,
That's a good
very
point.
interesting. That's
Mm.
very interesting. Okay, so we are running up against time constraints. I will say. I would want to get to about maybe 2 more questions, and then it seems like the panel is committed to return at some point, and I do believe that that is in order. So let me thank you for your commitment of time here, and know that I will be pressing on your time again to return. But let's a question that I do want to ask. You know, there's a lot of things that we learned during the past 2 months, right? And one of the things, in fact, Yvette mentioned her love of an agrarian society. And one of the things that I think all of us began to understand is the importance of local production, food security, and, you know, and really digging into what we've been blessed to have, which is the ability to grow food. We talked to the Prime Minister about that. Interestingly, he raised it as well. That he, you know, during this period of time, agriculture really, you know, sort of emerged as one of those industries that can actually help to fuel the recovery. I would hope, let me actually, you know what, let me not summarize his words, and we need to hear from the Prime Minister again here. So let's hear what he had to say with regards to that question.
While we cue that, let's just clarify, in case you just joined us, we're referring to the Prime Minister of Grenada, Dr. Keith Mitchell.
Yes.
What COVID-19 has done is to get us to recognize the absolute importance of agriculture. I think we take it for granted because in some cases when a number of goods were not being able to come into the country, people had to rely on a lot of local stuff. And I've been saying to them, well, you should have been doing that a long time ago. You should not have been importing all this foreign stuff that have all these chemicals. You have natural stuff. So I tell them all the time, I have all this bush around my house, and I boil my tea. And instead of going and buy this little packet, you don't know where they pass through, what they pass through, what sort of chemicals that have to keep them there. I said, why are you doing this? I think more. As you go around, when I drove around during this period, so I drive around, not exposing myself on unmarked vehicle. You see this stalls, little people with their stalls all over the country. Every little gap you meet, you see a lady or a man selling food stuff and people buying. So I know that there's been a lot of increase in local production, fish and vegetables, and a lot more of that. And I don't see people going back to a lot of the foreign stuff that they used to be buying, because I've been stressing this to them over and over. What I eat myself and the fruits and vegetables that I use constantly, and promoting the benefits of local stuff. So I think you'll see more and more of this in going forward. We intend to invest a significant sum of that into the agricultural sector, because we realize it is a critical sector, not only for jobs and not only for economic activity, but also for the health of the population.
Yeah, yeah.
Prime Minister made a lot of good points there.
Yeah. So there you have it, right? So not only for, you know, economy, not only, but for health reasons, etc. I was very, very happy to hear about that from the Prime Minister. But you know, especially resorts and you know, sort of buying local produce and supporting that particular community, not just for, again, economic support, but it seems like it has implications for even health. I'd love to hear from, well, let's start with James, your views, and then we'll go to Karen. And I know that Yvette has something to say about this because she and I talk about agriculture all the time, and I know she's a big proponent of that. So this is something for everyone. And then Hugh, I know you like to eat, so you know, we'll involve you as well, James.
Thanks, Frederick. No, that was a really good point about locally or regionally grown food. It's good for health, it's good for the economy, it's good for food security, it's good for the planet, because if we can grow it locally, we don't burn as much fossil fuel transporting it here. So I'm definitely all for that. The Caribbean imports about 80% of our calories in total. And that's part of the reason we have the big hypertension, diabetes problems. If we can switch to eating more locally grown stuff, that would be a really big help. So if all the leaders in the region would do this, it would help us and would help the industry as well.
Karen?
So, you know, ditto what James said, but you're also striking a chord with me because I don't understand why we don't do it. Every destination in Turks and Caicos, it's minuscule, like a 0.1% of what we're able to produce. So we can't sustain, there's no sustainability from an agriculture standpoint. And the other thing that it's good for is that people love farm to table, and you can actually charge premium, you know, when you can demonstrate that this is just grown right out in your backyard. On a tiny side note, I wish you could see my peppers, basil, and cilantro that I started growing during the lockdown out of necessity. And they're amazing. And so it's easy to do. There's no reason why we don't do it. I don't know why we don't do it. We need to think about that more.
Sounds like a program too.
Yes,
This is
exactly.
such an important.
Yeah.
This is such an important topic. Such an important topic. Before Silver Sands came back, there was an original years ago, right? But before these new hotels started popping up in Grenada, there was the most incredible man. He passed away just before the lockdown, Sir Royston Hopkins.
Oh,
and
my dear friend.
One of the things, you know, he was like my mentor without me telling him that, like, because he was a very successful businessman who, at the heart of what he taught, was kindness.
Yes.
Kindness, that you could be so incredibly successful, but the bottom line is, if you don't take care of people, if you don't make them feel good, it doesn't matter. But one of the things I remember most about going to Spice Island is that everything on the menu came from Grenada. He was big on that. If it was not in season, it was not on the menu. I don't care how much you like sugar cakes. If we're not making sugar cakes in July, you're not getting sugar cakes in July. If breadfruit is not in season, well, we will not be importing anything or giving you a substitute ingredient for oil down. He had a huge, beautiful hotel, but he wanted to make sure that people got a taste of Grenada in that. And that is going to be very important. You know, I'm the granddaughter of a farmer. You know, I still love going to a market. It's how I was raised. I used to do the shopping for my grandfather's shop. Used to go to the garden with my grandfather. I know how to slice a cocoa in 2 seconds. I know how to pick some nutmegs. I know how to put the mace to dry. I know how to climb a coconut tree. I can do all of that. And it is
I want to see that.
I want to see that too.
You know, it's like,
the video in part
first
two.
of all, the exercise, right? The exercise in being a farming person is unbelievable. But we've got to get back to it. And one of the things that the Prime Minister spoke about very, very early is the importance of SGU, St. George's University, which started out as a medical school, but as you know, it's a full college now, university. And I always got a little nervous when I saw that a whole bunch of Americans and Canadians and British students were coming to Grenada to study, because I was like, oh my gosh, people are not going to push them to eat oil down. Instead, what's going to happen is we're going to be eating cornflakes and we're going to be eating tuna in a can, because you want to make sure that when these students go into the supermarket on Grand Anse Beach and they want, you know, yogurt that is probably the worst thing for you, you know, or like all the canned stuff. We want to make sure they have it. Now, okay, maybe their systems are ready for it. But what inevitably happens is that the islanders start eating the things that are, let's be honest, your system is going to reject. And it's going to, the further away you get from the soil, you know, Grenadians are very proud to call ourselves people of the soil, daughters of the soil, you know. We've got to go back for all of the things that Dr. James said. I'm a former journalist, so I wrote everything you said down. Got my pen in my hand. For all of the things that we could take care of, hypertension and diabetes and all of everything it's a direct correlation to what we put in our bodies. And eating from the soil is the way to go. And it's good for the economy, obviously. It's good for your health. It's good for the environment. It's all of, and let's not talk about the pride that comes with eating from your own garden. Caribbean pride. Okay, so, and of course, you know, all the other islands could come to Grenada and get all of our spices. We're happy to share. But yes, we really do have to, with this whole heart change that's happening, I hope the head changes too. I hope people get smarter about their health and put that first.
Yeah. Well, Hugh, I don't know if you want to take the next question, and then we really only have 2 more questions. I guess I'll proceed to ask you, and you can jump in if you'd like. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. All right then. Well, again, you know, it's great, these lessons that have come. You know, there's been a lot of difficulty caused by COVID and Corona and pandemic, but there's been a lot of very good things that have happened as well. I mean, it taught us quite a few things. So we are grateful for those things. And I think, you know, our focus on agriculture, if that's one of them, I think that's going to inure to our benefit. So let me turn to this question. The Prime Minister talked about regional cooperation, right? We all here know and can feel and probably have experience with this whole idea of One Caribbean and working together, CARICOM and well, going back to the Federation. And to some extent, it is probably even more important now that there is a community so that we can exchange in the marketplace of ideas, you know, the best practices in order to lead ourselves out of this situation. We spoke to the Prime Minister about that, and he is a regionalist for sure, and has been, I think you will agree, that, and everyone else. In fact, would you like to make mention of his work in that regard?
Well, Prime Minister Mitchell has been a regionalist, as you said, for very many years, and as you know, this is not his first or second go around as the Prime Minister of Grenada. He was also at one stage the chairman of CARICOM, so he has a lot of experience, and he has a tremendous track record in being a regionalist and being an influencer in helping to bring the region together, which is not to say that Grenada obviously isn't his primary responsibility. That's what the voters expect him to do, but he is interested in making sure that there is a stronger Caribbean, because I think he believes and he understands that the stronger the Caribbean is, the stronger Grenada will be also.
Right.
Well,
exactly.
Frederick, you know my thinking in that. You know my thinking in that. My One Caribbean stands. I think it's very important. That's very important.
Well, we took some time to explore this question with the PM, and let's go to some of what he said, which was quite interesting. Let's hear from him. And while that switch is being made, know that the Prime Minister's entire interview will be made available from start to finish for the entire audience. Yes.
I was driving one day in my country, and a taxi driver, a local fellow, he said, Prime Minister, you're young in this thing. He said, that boy is going to go, they will go behind your back and make deals with the cruise line, and they will leave you stranded. And you go, exactly what the ordinary taxi man said to me, that's what happened.
Wow.
The cruise line left me, and other countries in the region took them.
Wow.
Same friends, my colleagues, and I was chairman of CARPHA at the time. So that was a serious lesson. And that tells me unless we get consensus, I ain't touching nothing like that.
Right.
Let's go with consensus, and I'm going. But if I just hear and I'm watching first to see whether men going to implement. If you implement, I'm there. If you're not implementing, I'm not going to be the sacrificial lamb again.
Well,
Right.
his disappointment was clear there. I thought he's disappointed whenever he sees cracks or fissures in what really ought to be a much more cohesive and collaborative Caribbean. And to your point earlier, this is what we need right now. One Caribbean, one sea, one voice, one Caribbean has been the mantra of the CTO for a lot of years, and that hasn't changed. It's even more important now than ever before.
Indeed, indeed. So here we have a regionalist, a prime minister that has done an extraordinary amount of work to bring us together, and has a clear story about, and prior to that comment, obviously he talked about his desire and his heartfelt, and passionate concern for us coming together as a region. But there's this big but. You represent, Karen, again, an organization that is regional. Let's have your thoughts on how this is happening, if it's happening, should we have cause for concern?
His thoughts are compelling and spot on, and he is a well-known regionalist. But I guess the first thing that came to my mind when you started talking about this is I find it unfortunate that we do come together in a very strong fashion during times of crisis. Like right now, you see us more than ever communicating, liaising, sharing, learning, growing together. I wish that, and this happens every time there's a hurricane or any type of regional crisis, you see Caribbean come together in an amazing way. So if we could dovetail that into a positive and look at the opportunities that we have ahead of us and how we can grow so much stronger and bigger together. I think that you have different factions that, although they probably deep in their heart agree the best way forward is true unity, a true sort of one Caribbean theme, their foundations, their principles, their, whatever their differences and opinions are so strong that it sort of keeps us from being able to do that. Because as you know, when you go to the extreme that I believe you're talking about, it will take some compromise. It would take some, working together. And so through CHTA, we approach it, I guess, from two sides, because we're really more focused on the public sector, if you will. Our membership base are hoteliers and businesses and allied members throughout the region. So we're an advocacy group for that sector. Now, it's very important to note that, we have the strong relationships with the governments, with the tourism boards, partnerships with CTO and so forth, but it's not necessarily CHCA's mantra to pull the governments together, although we actively promote, we advocate, and we certainly try our best. But I believe that there's a cohesiveness amongst the private sector that is, could be maybe a good example for a way forward for these governments. But when I say all of this, I understand the complexities. I mean, because I have gotten to know the different regions, the different personalities, the different backgrounds, and some of these issues are not current issues. They go back, many generations, many years. And so So I certainly do understand it. It's not that it's not something that's real or something that's relevant, but I do wish we could find a way forward together.
And we will invite other leaders, won't we, Frederick, on this program so that other Caribbean leaders have an opportunity to say their piece.
Yes, indeed. Yvette, you have some comments on that?
Well, I mean, for me, it's the only way up. And I think whoever doubted that the Caribbean, the islands don't work together, probably at the very beginning, we have to take a look and see that this is probably the first time ever that there is a disaster that hit everybody at the same time.
Yes.
At the same time.
Yes.
And I think it was very important that people secure their borders, take care of, before they could figure out how to help. It's almost like being on the airplane. You got to put your mask on first, right? But like Karen said, I mean, the history of the Caribbean, I mean, I remember when Ivan devastated Grenada, the regional help for Grenada. I actually think the Trinidadians got there by walking because they got there so quickly. It was just amazing what happened and how quickly, aesthetically at least, Grenada was able to put roofs up and things like that. So it's the only how to work. I think it's okay to like I said earlier, to carry your island flag. But we really need to start thinking about the one Caribbean mentality, whether it's the United Caribbean or whatever. It's funny. Let me just mention this one thing, Frederick, because, the thing that is joyful for me is that I've managed to have some children that are really, really smart, and they challenge me when I think I'm the smart girl in the room. They challenge me. But I remember being around our island in the kitchen, and I brought this up, my concept of one Caribbean, and my daughters listened, and I thought I was making strong points. And then the question I was not ready for is like, I think it was my youngest daughter. She said, well, will the islands unite on who goes on the dollar bill? And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't even think about that, because she was like, when the euro came into existence, obviously the UK was like, no way, we still want, so at some point we have to get down to that nitty gritty, wouldn't we? But I think if it starts in the heart, and we create these bylaws and treaties and whatever that we all agree on, what the money looks like becomes, secondary. But to build a true region, I think we have to come together. We have to come together. We just have to.
I see James scratching his head.
I'm just agreeing.
It should be on the $50 bill.
Anybody who has studied this realizes many of our territories are 100,000 or less. That's not a real viable economic proposition. You really need to come together.
Yep.
I've worked at the regional level much of my life, so I have no difficulty with this. I love Prime Minister of Grenada. I love to hear Prime Minister of Barbados. She seems to have no difficulty being a proud Bajan and being a proud member of the Caribbean, and that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Bajans are proud. Like that.
Bajans are proud. All Bajans are proud.
Oh gosh.
Let's not go there.
We're about to have a fight.
It's about to go down. Let's not go there.
I'm just trying to say, which prime minister did you start with? Which prime
minister? Hey. Yvette, Noel-Schure, you're out of order. I'm just trying to final question. I think that we would be remiss to not talk about what's happening in the United States, because the United States is obviously our main source market for tourism. It is, many of us have left the Caribbean and headed to the United States to a promise of a Caribbean dream, forged through the American dream. And there's quite a bit, we can all agree, of unrest happening right now in that number one source market. That one could argue is necessary. But how do we process that in connection with tourism, and in connection with what will it do to our number one source market? Will there be a challenge as a result of that, and or are there some opportunities in that challenge, which is usually the case as well? So let's talk about that. I want to be very clear about what I'm talking about, and I'm talking about the struggle for racial equality and the issues regarding racial injustice and police brutality against the African American community. We, Caribbean folks have always been a part of the discussion for equality and in America, from names like Marcus Garvey to Malcolm X, Sophie Carmichael, and on and on. We've been a part of that dialogue. But I'd love to hear, and I believe it's very, very important. So to some extent, I saved the best for last. Yeah, it's very important that we have this discussion, because I do believe that it will have an impact on our road ahead as well. So I don't know, Hugh, you choose. Do you want to supplement that question with anything, and then choose the first panelist that will address it?
Well, my only supplement to it is that we're extremely proud to see that a number of Caribbean people and some Caribbean governments have actually added their voices to the message, to the Black Lives Matter message. They've added their voices and they've added their actions. And there isn't a single Caribbean person, I believe, that doesn't have a very close relative and a friend in the United States. Now, we're talking in the United States because, to your excellent point, the US is responsible for about 50% of all of the visitation to the Caribbean. But the Black Lives Matter issue has become global. So no matter where you live, the issues of the Black Lives Matter struggle have had to touch you. This whole business of racial inequality and police brutality and so on. No matter where you live in the universe, you probably are hearing about this now. So there's no question that it will have some effect on all of us to a greater or lesser extent. And there's no question that we have to speak up. We can't stay silent. That kind of complicity is not an option.
So where do we start? Let's go to you, Karen.
I was hoping you'd start with Yvette, but I would say, I think it's too early to tell what the impact will be. I agree with you, Frederick. There could be an impact in the region. If you're talking visitor arrivals, I'm just not sure. I'm really not sure. I agree with Hugh. It's been endearing and heartwarming to see the support that's coming out of the region for the cause and for, and I think that's as it should be. One compelling thought that keeps coming into my mind as I watch all of this from a regional perspective, it just might give an opportunity to focus and highlight more on the culture and the heritage and the history, in the region of the African Americans, because that's something that not every destination does. And I think it's extremely important. I think there's so many opportunities to really get back to that, get back to the roots, if you will, of, how the Caribbean started, who founded the Caribbean, the original inhabitants and so forth. And I know a number of people are working on different initiatives, to try to bring focus and highlight to this. And I think this will only enhance it now that the whole issue has become global, as Hugh said. I don't know. I think it's too early to see the impact, because this is a very friendly region, and I don't see the disparity. I don't see the racism. I mean, I am from Texas originally, but I've been in Caribbean for 20 years, and I don't see the same sentiments going on here, that we're now really bringing to the forefront in America. So will it be an opportunity? I'm not sure. The biggest thing that, that I feel is that we have a responsibility now to do more, to raise the awareness. And again, hopefully something positive like the history and the heritage and the culture. I think it's a great springboard for that now.
Well, if I could, this is going to be a terribly immodest comment. Just before the panelists say their piece, this is immodest, right? Caribbean countries also have an opportunity to set themselves up as examples. People are looking for best cases around the world, and I'm not saying that our societies are perfect, because we've got issues in our societies too. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that there is, to Karen's excellent point, there's a lot of example of harmonious existence. There's a lot of example of people rising through the ranks and running our countries and being economically successful and so on and so forth. There's a lot of best practice that we can take. People don't understand this because they look at a region, oh, you know, just a bunch of people down there, you know, in the islands, and, you know, it's just 40 million people in the whole Caribbean. But there's some best case examples that people can take from the Caribbean as well. It's not that we don't also have our own struggle, and we're learning from what's happening globally, but we have a region of some harmony, and it's a region that has been tolerant and welcoming for a very long time, and will continue to be that. But anyway, I've said enough. It's really to our panelists to express their opinions.
Oh, that was a very important point as well. Let's go to Yvette. I know you're itching. I know you're itching, but let's go to James first, and then we'll go.
Oh, much so.
Yeah, I know. James.
Thanks for bringing up this point, Frederick. It would have been remiss with this first edition if we had not touched on this really major thing, not just in America, but in the world. Yeah. It seems as if humans are capable of great acts of love and kindness, and we're also capable of really inhuman action, from Imperial Rome to the police force that killed a gentleman recently by kneeling on him for all that time. And that, you know, that was hard to even think about it. The situation in the States, which we've always looked up to from the islands, is a sad one. I am not being politically one way or another. It is sad that much of the rest of the world, which looks to the US for leadership, sees what's going on there. And the Black Lives Matter, I guess, is just this boiling up of decades of frustration over the aftermath of industrialized slavery. We've always had slavery in the world, but the Black slavery from Africa, that was the first time it was industrialized on that scale. And a lot of, as is happening all over the world, it's leading to the tearing down of some of the statues and icons of that, at least from public. They shouldn't be there, and I agree with that. Not so sure about Columbus, but the out and out slave owners, they shouldn't be in public statues. They should be maybe in a museum or in a book or something. And it's really leading to a rethink on the police side. A lot, you know, it's about one person that, I was counting it the other day, it's about 1,000 extrajudicial killings per year in the United States. So that's 3 a day that are being killed. You only see a few that make,
of course,
headline.
So this is a much needed moment of checking and rebalancing of the United States society, and us in the Caribbean should really be as supportive as we can be.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Before I get to you, Yvette, and then I would like to say that this is a topic, again, that deserves its own panel emphasis and focus, right? So I want our listening audience to understand that we appreciate that, we know that, and we are definitely going to do exactly that on the road ahead. So stay tuned for that. And before Yvette just completely explodes here, let's get to Yvette.
I think you know that I have been an active participant in the movement. I've been very open in my conversations with people around the world about my struggles with racism, with so many incidents where I felt humiliated, destroyed, as a woman, as a Black woman, and then as a Caribbean woman. I think there's an opportunity here. I can't answer the question about the tourism part. The one thing I could say about that is that I think the Caribbean has to really practice what it preaches in our kindness and our friendliness. And when we open our shores, we need to give the same level of love and attention to Black people coming to our shores. a lot of African-American friends won't go to the Caribbean because they think they're treated badly by Black people who look like them. I'm one of those girls. I'm one of those girls that when I return to certain parts of the Caribbean, I feel like I have to explain myself, like why I deserve to be in this 5-star hotel. It's all part of the results of racism, you know, those who are oppressed and the oppressors. And so we all have to make changes. We all have to make changes. And as Hugh said, what an incredible display of humanity and support that the Caribbean people gave to the Black Lives Matter movement a couple of days ago. I think it was maybe Saturday or Sunday in Brooklyn. We have to find ways beyond when someone Black comes, say, welcome home, brother, welcome home, sister, the way they do in Africa. We have to do more than that. The first thing we have to do is we have to entice Black people to come to the Caribbean. We have to tell them that this part of the history, this diaspora, is also their history. We have to teach them that we have some things that we can cook the way you cook in the South. We're using different ingredients or the same ones to call it something different. Come home to that table. But where it starts is with economics. It's with actual dollars. Where do these hotels and these tourism authorities take out their ads? Where? Where do they do that? Not enough publications that cater to the Black community in America get to see an ad that says, come to Jamaica, that says, come to Grenada. Because the dollars are being spent with Hearst and Condé Nast, the New York Times, Time Magazine. And I'm not saying anything bad about any of those. I'm just saying many of the businesses where you feel that you want to advertise do not cater to Black people and the Black dollar. And since we know the American dollar has no other color than green, it's important to change those advertising to go to the communities so that they could consider coming. And I'm talking about not just Essence Magazine and all of, you know, OK Player and all of those places, but I'm also talking about in the middle of the BET Awards. Why isn't there a commercial in the middle of the BET Awards when you know that the majority of that audience watching will be people of color? Why aren't we advertising our shores on that big scale? Why aren't we taking out those ads, those Instagram ads, those Facebook ads? You know, why aren't we going into places where people are? Why aren't we going into the Hollywood Reporter that Black actors and Black actresses read? Why aren't we courting them to come to the Caribbean? We're not doing that. We have to be honest and say that most of the advertising to come to the Caribbean has been just like
White folks.
eye to white tourists.
There you go, James.
We've got to be open and honest with that. I am married interracially, and I could tell you, we are treated completely differently when we show up at hotels and restaurants in the Caribbean. If my husband goes down to dinner to breakfast first in the morning, he comes up with a totally different attitude. He's like, oh my goodness, this is great. And I come back angry, like, wait a second, what is happening? We've got to stop that. We've got to look at all money as green. And we have to look at everybody with the potential to plan and take their families on vacations where they are treated special. I've said this before, not in this forum, but before. I do not recall the exact population of Aruba, but Aruba has the best slogan of the Caribbean. It says, blah, 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 amount of friends you have not met. Like they already, they are telling you there are 100,000 of us or maybe 50,000 of us, and we are your potential friends. And we are going to hug and embrace everybody that comes to our shores, regardless of what they look like. For somebody who is Black in America to be rejected by Black society, I'm sorry, by white society in America, and then go to islands that have people that look like them and feel rejected there too. The traumas continue when that happens, particularly when you have saved to have an incredible escape. You're trying to escape from the madness of America. You're trying to escape. You don't want to have these unconscious biases happening to you there too. You don't want these microaggressions happening there too. So I think Black hotel workers, white hotel workers, indigenous hotel workers, everybody's got to sit down and be reprogrammed. What happened to George Floyd has taken out the bandage of all of these things within all of us. And we've got to come back into this post-COVID situation as better people, willing to just say, welcome home. Welcome home.
Well said, everyone. Well said. I will. I concur wholeheartedly. I remember coming up as a young lawyer in the United States, working for Fortune 50 Viacom media company and Johnson & Johnson, and prior to that, one of the largest firms in the world, Simpson Thacher. And I remember, sitting at home and seeing every now and then a commercial for the Jamaica Tourist Board or the Barbados Tourist Board or St. Lucia, et cetera, on CNN, and wondering, I wonder if that commercial doesn't really speak to me, because, all of the images, none of those images look like me. And I'd always wondered, during that period of time, does anyone in the Caribbean ever think that there is a market of folks in the United States in particular, but around the world, that looks like me or in a position to travel, that want to travel, even those that you have to save up to come, we want to come, but we're not spoken to. I believe that is a really tremendously lost opportunity that we continue to do on an annual basis. And here at Temple, we want to get that message out, that especially in this time, when your general market is contracting and shrinking because of the health crisis, in business, you look for other sources, you look for other places where you can fill the gap, where you can reach other markets, new markets. And so I do believe very firmly that this is an opportunity to speak to a community. In fact, we had an artist on, that we do a lot of music here at Temple, hence look at the name, right?
Temple.
We do a lot of music. And we had an artist that was on one of our lives just the other day. She has performed on several of our festivals, at least 3 of them, St. Kitts Music Festival, and so, some others. And she remembers those performances so fondly because of the time that she spent in the island and feeling so connected to the island. She's from South Central LA, maybe. I think she's from Compton, and she says that when she landed and she got here, there was a connection that she really loved, right? There are those instances, obviously, that Yvette is talking about that happen just way too often in terms of our treatment. But the fact of the matter is there is a connection with this community that if we tap into, that 35 million that comes turns into 40 million,
Exactly.
Yeah, and I do believe at the end of the day, we have to work very, very hard to change that mindset. In fact, we're going to end with the Prime Minister on a note like that.
Frederick, before we do that, let me just say one thing. It's that before COVID, the fastest growing businesses in America really were small businesses owned by Black women.
That's right. That's
Black
considered
women,
a pretty
yeah.
big story.
So I mean, COVID would
Yeah.
change a lot of that. But
Yes.
in terms of advertising, if you do ads geared to Black women, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I think what we have to do too in the future, this is a whole different program as well, is to give some Caribbean countries the opportunity to come on and defend themselves, because some of them will have a very strong defense for some of the comments that we have made. They can
Absolutely.
they can
Name one of them.
My wife is a person of color, and what Yvette is saying is completely true. You're treated differently. If I go to the front desk, different reception than if she goes. And there's some things they don't send me because I'm the wrong person to go. They send my wife.
Right, that's right. But
same here.
Sorry?
Yeah, you said a very interesting point. You said there's a number of defenses, but name one for us. I mean, this is a whole other topic, but you know.
Oh my goodness! Now I'm going to hang myself by singling some out. But Jamaica clearly is a prime example. I mean, if anybody, look, there's room for improvement everywhere in the Caribbean, but if there's any country that's pretty much led the parade of promoting its culture and making sure that its advertising is right and its targets are right and so on, Jamaica really has to be up there close to the top. Bahamas has done a tremendous job of that as well. And surprisingly, so has, this is the shocker of all, Aruba has as well in more recent times, and Yvette, and I'm sure you will know as well, Frederick, that some of that started with what at the time was known as the Sinbad Music Festival, and that's continued. But Curacao has as well, Barbados most certainly has, Antigua has. So the point is that there's somebody that I've excluded that's going to say, oh, how come you don't pay attention to what we've been doing? The region, the Caribbean, has done a much better job, I mean, of making sure that it advertises itself correctly so that people see themselves in the picture. That didn't always happen. It didn't happen, when we were growing up. But really, that's changed fundamentally in the last while. Should more be done? Yes. Should they do a better job of raising the funding to market the region properly, so that some countries that don't have a prayer of getting their name known anywhere, so that they can benefit from all of this? Much better job ought to be done. But we're going to have to give the countries of the Caribbean an opportunity to come on in previous life, that would have been me on the hot spot. That is not me anymore. I will give people the opportunity to come and speak for themselves.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Okay, so listen.
Let me just say, cancel culture is not what we're going to do. We're just not. We're going to be like anybody who states that they are ready to make changes, ready to be open. I think people have to be willing to listen to that. But, I believe that there are things that need major improvement. I agree with you specifically on Jamaica. Jamaica has really, they just do tourism right. They do it very, very right. But we've got some underlying issues that go back to our shared history of divide, and who's better. And we've got to fix that from the ground up. We have to fix it from our homes. We have to fix it from our schools. When I was in Grenada, I spoke to a hospitality class, and it was basically just telling them that no matter what happens, I'm going to keep getting on that plane. I'm going to keep coming home, but I'm also going to use every single incident to make it a teachable moment, and never to embarrass anybody, to just pull someone aside and say, you could do that a little better. I travel all over the world and I know it's done better, and I want you to be better, So I think that, like we started out with the question, this is an opportunity. Let's just get down to the economics. It's an opportunity to make amazing money, and it's an opportunity for people to feel healed from all of this madness that's happening in America. It's an opportunity to feel like you are being healed when you go to the Caribbean shores. That should be our priority.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. So I'm gonna have the Prime Minister have the final words here. He talked about the importance of media, and you know, obviously that was near and dear to my heart because of the obvious building you know, a network that is totally devoted upon the principles of love of the Caribbean, you know, and everything that we are. And so let's hear from the Prime Minister as he closed with regards to the importance of media and the messages. Yeah. And remember again, the full Prime Minister, for the listening audience, the full Prime Minister's address will be posted.
I expect to hear from Tempo and to see that I know you're a partner in this whole, the Caribbean. If you are successful, the Caribbean will be successful. And if we are, you will be. So it's a partnership. Let's go together as we have been doing. I really believe. Then you look at what's happening in other parts of the world with the infection rates there and in Latin America and other parts of the world. We see the problems that we face. So I think there's a growth opportunity, and we have to bleed for our brothers and sisters in those parts. But at the same time, we have to realize that the Caribbean was reasonably lucky so far that we have been able to work together and put the necessary protocol in place to protect our people. And that tells people when they come, they also will be protected. So let's go together, and you guys in the media have a responsibility to send the message.
Right.
Right.
The Honorable Dr. Keith Mitchell, Prime Minister of Grenada. I want to thank everyone really sincerely for the time that was put in here. Clearly change doesn't come unless we discuss it, right? And really try to bring our own expertise to the table, and again, in a marketplace of ideas, and come up with solutions to the problems that we face, knowing that we have tremendous opportunity in the Caribbean. All of that, again, is fueled by our independent love for the Caribbean. And collective love for the Caribbean. So we will continue to march on. Any final words from the panel? Let's start with you, Karen.
So, I mean, I love Yvette. I can't wait to actually hear the playback of what you just said. And, you know, it just goes to show when you think you know it all, you don't, or when you think you really have it right, there's always another side of the story, and there's a better way. And I do agree with you. I think we have tremendous opportunity, but I also agree with Hugh. I think it's sort of a chicken and egg. Who goes first? Who takes that first step? Who makes that first effort? We clearly have an amazing responsibility and opportunity to further impact change. And I hope that we can do that. And I hope you come here and give us a chance to show you that we can be. We can do that. And so thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Absolutely. James.
Thanks, Frederick. Well, this has been a really interesting couple of hours. I enjoyed it, enjoyed the discussion. A lot of thought-provoking and some difficult things we talked about that needed talking about. A lot of very thoughtful people all over the world are saying that this is an opportunity or a big push to change, and we need to change. And if we don't, we're in really deep trouble as a world. So I would say, yeah, that it is an opportunity, and it will not happen unless we talk about it, dig into it, get uncomfortable, and then move on.
Indeed. Thank you, James. Yvette.
Well, thank you, Frederick and Hugh, for this opportunity for me to have such an incredible place at a table that includes Karen and James. I've learned so much today from both, and I am honored. I think that this pause in the entire world was important for us to all stop and see what needed to be fixed. I think this horrible racial incident that opened our eyes to the possibilities, the potential that we could love more, that we could be kinder, and that we could really start seeing each other as allies. So I hope that that's what happens, not just in America, but certainly in the region of the world I love the most, the Caribbean, and across our globe. That is my prayer.
Awesome. That's a great prayer. I join you in it. Hugh.
Yes, sir. Well,
Final word.
I want to join you in thanking our panelists for being so generous with their time, and thanking our audience as well. We look forward to your feedback and to your comments. And most especially, I want to say that when we get into this discussion the next time around, we're going to emphasize the fact that all of us can do something to effect change. Either you are part of the solution or you're part of the problem. We ought to be a part of the solution. The problem is out there. Let's help to solve it.
Indeed, indeed. Wonderful. Well, I think that we can all agree that we had a very successful conversation. These conversations don't lead to the answers right away, but they certainly take us a step further, right? And we here at Tempo intend to continue these conversations, and we're going to get deeper in a lot of these subjects as we spoke about. We're gonna do a lot of educating, because I do believe our community and each one of us on this panel could do with even more education, as you suggested, Karen. So we're going to definitely be doing that a lot. In fact, one of our great heroes of the struggle for racial justice and equality, Marcus Garvey, who whose home is Jamaica, said that a people without knowledge of their history is like a tree without roots. So we want to make sure that we understand the history of the Caribbean. We understand the history of our people, and we want to disseminate that information. Another great son of the soil, or at least in heritage, is Malcolm X. He, of course, with his Grenadian mother, Yvette, right? Says media is the most powerful force on earth, because it has the power to turn the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent, and change the minds of men. And so we understand here at Tempo that we have a great obligation and a great responsibility to disseminate information that moves us forward. And we're going to continue to do that. And I'm thankful to each one of you for contributing to that message. Thank you very, very much. Right. And to our listening audience, thank you for many of you hung in there with us, and we really appreciate it. I'm told that, there's a lot of appreciation for what we've just done. We're going to, of course, edit this broadcast and make it available. It's going to be really nicely packaged. I want to thank my team here at Tempo Networks. They're an awesome team, particularly you, Phil Briones, who has been on here with us and handling the technical issues. We can't do anything by ourselves, right? And so I give thanks to my team and to all those that have contributed. Thank you once again. Do enjoy the rest of your day as we charge forward in the road ahead.
Everybody. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye.